This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight. Welcome to the Nobel Podcast. My name is Sam Alaimo. I'm here with Patrick Van Horne, co-author of the book Left of Bang, co-founder of the CP Journal, and a Marine Corps veteran. Patrick, welcome to the Nobel Podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Sam. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Let's dive in where we usually do. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Syracuse, New York, so upstate New York. Pretty much my pre-college, my life really just revolved around sports. Like pretty much any memory I have was around playing hockey and lacrosse. And I don't know if this was my parents' plan, but both me, my brother, my sister, we were so busy playing sports, probably kept us out of trouble, but it was what we were doing all day, every day, it feels like.
It's a question I ask most military guys, and the answer is always stunning. Did you get in quite a bit of trouble?
Not really. And again, I think that was like my parents' plan of we were just playing literally from like the time we woke up, before school, go to school, as soon as we were done with school, 7 days a week, there were sports. And either my dad or one of my friends' dads was always the coach of like pretty much every team I was on. And so there was no time where we were like, honestly, not supervised. That wasn't like that, but there was always someone around who had the next practice, the next chance to run us, the next chance to do something. And so there was very little time, I think, for me to get into trouble.
Okay. So you're hard-hitting in sports, super focused. When was your first introduction to the Marine Corps? When did that beautiful uniform walk through your mind?
Yeah. Just after, right around September 11th. So growing up, I knew nothing about the military, Sam. I mean, both of my grandfathers were in World War II. One was a Marine, one was in the Army. But this was nothing, that we talked about. And so September 11th was my freshman year of college. I was going to school just a little over an hour north of New York City. And that's kind of the moment that I think that shifted things for me. But before that, I mean, the military, I might have one friend from high school went to West Point, one enlisted in the Marines, but I really had like zero knowledge or understanding about what life in the military looked like. And I was just saying this to someone recently, but growing up, I loved reading Tom Clancy books, Jack Ryan books, and Jack Ryan was a Marine, but it might as well have been like Lord of the Rings to me. I could not ever put into like myself into, those shoes of what that life even meant at that time. And then September 11th, yeah.
So it's the Marine Corps. Was it a surge of patriotism after 9/11? What was the motivation there?
Yeah, it was very simple. There was like kind of two simple things that got me there. The first was people came and attacked us, and we were coming back for them, and I was going to be a part of that. That was never in doubt. But coming kind of from a background with no understanding of what that meant, what originally attracted me to the Marines was because I was in college, I could go to officer candidate school, and I could go through officer candidate school and quit at any time. Their policy was, if you don't want to be a Marine, we don't want you until you accept, the commission. And that initially attracted my attention because I was like, okay, I don't really know what I'm getting into. I don't know what this means. I'm going to go do my first summer down in Quantico. And then I came back and I knew right away, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And realizing that the Marines was the path that I was going to go. But what originally drew me in was a chance to kind of learn and see it before I made the big commitment to it.
You did your undergrad, went to OCS. What was your kind of first position, your specialty as a Marine Corps officer?
Yeah, so I became an infantry officer. And so the way the Marines work, you spend 6 months at something called the basic school that every officer goes through. And then from there, I went on to the infantry officer course. Coming out of that, ended 2006, became a platoon commander, company executive officer, company commander, then ultimately, which I think is what we're going to probably spend most of the time talking about, my time with the Combat Hunter program.
Let's talk about your combat deployments. What do you think is relevant to talk about those? And then in particular, let's drill in on the actual sense of combat and how that eventually led into your knowledge as an instructor with that Combat Hunter program.
Absolutely. So my first deployment, we were part of the surge into Anbar province in Iraq in 2007, part of General Petraeus's approach to embedding with the local population, separating insurgents from their support base, isolating the insurgents, and to do it by being, kind of side by side in those communities. And that was very different. That experience, very different than what we had trained for. It wasn't, nonstop combat, when I got there. And a lot of our instructors, both at the basic school and the infantry officer course, they had been there for the invasion. They had been there for some of those really large, really intense battles. And they brought that perspective into the way, they taught and those experiences that they shared with us. And then, getting there, I was out, my first deployment, I was out near the Syrian border, and we were responsible for this kind of handful of these little farming villages along the river. And because the strategy was working, because the insurgents were getting separated, we were just driving essentially between these different villages to try to provide support. And what it really meant was that we were just living in a minefield of IEDs out there, because as the insurgents got pushed out of these cities and out of these villages, they started finding really creative ways to bomb us. And so really that my first deployment specifically was dealing with trying to accomplish that, mission, embed, isolate the insurgents, take away their support base, and not get blown up while doing that across this huge area along the river.
Let's drill into the IED piece.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit different from a platoon of bad guys with AK-47s and chest kit. You're often dealing with people who are not carrying a weapon and maybe some sort of detonator. They could be anybody on the side of the street, anybody in a village, anybody in a passing vehicle. Were you early in that game starting to try to assess what people looked like, how they were behaving, to see if maybe this is the kind of person who was about to blow us to hell?
Not really, to be honest with you. And where we were, the types of IEDs that we were dealing with at the time were these pressure strip IEDs. Essentially, for anyone who's not familiar with them, it's two pieces of wood. In the middle, on the inside of those pieces of wood, is a little metal plate, and a wire goes from each of those plates and then out to a battery, and then underneath that to the explosive in the premises that are referred to as victim-operated IEDs, where when you walk or drive over it, you step on that pressure plate, you push those two pieces of wood together, you complete the circuit that then allows the bomb to explode. And so we weren't dealing with this situation where there was a person on the side of the road with a detonator in their hand and a stretch of wire connecting them to the bomb. You could put these in at any time and didn't have to be there to see them go off or to detonate them. And it was just kind of the area that we're in. They were just spread out. Areas where the locals probably knew where they were, so they wouldn't drive over them. But at the same time, the spots where the military vehicles would go. So as we moved between these different villages, spots where they could just put them out when they were safe, and then just kind of wait for us to hit them. And you ask about that. I was looking at behavior. Not really. There's, in hindsight, if nothing else, there's no doubt in my mind that we probably talked to some of the people that were putting them in. We would search these homes. We would, if we didn't find IED material, all right, sorry for dumping your house and go on to the next one. We probably dealt with them. We probably interacted with them, and we had no idea, kind of who was out there. And as a result, at least during that deployment, we probably, the people who were burying them, they were still there when we left, unless they were kind of arrested or kind of caught up in something else that we were doing as well.
What was like the primary focus of that first tour? What was your mission statement during that period? Was it patrol of contact? Like, what was the whole point?
Sam, I have no idea. Right. And I say that, it's, to this day, it's like one of my biggest frustrations kind of about that. I had an idea, going in as part of the surge, we understood the overall mission, the overall strategy, separate the insurgent from their support base, get them on our side. And then from there, we'll get the intelligence that we need to target. How that translated down from, kind of that theater level commander down to me as a 23-year-old platoon commander, something got lost along the way. And I say one of the biggest frustrations of trying to make decisions where you're in an environment. For me, it was my first deployment, never been to the Middle East before, never been to, in a combat area before. You're trying to make decisions, you're trying to make priorities. It's really hard to do when you don't know what the strategy is or understanding how your actions are ultimately going to do that. And so a lot of the time it was trying to find these insurgents, trying to build some support with the community for them to tell us, hey, this is the person. And there would be times here or there, but never also really knew if they were just telling us the person that they wanted, their annoying neighbor that they wanted to get rolled up, or if this was, a true insurgent or someone that we were actually out there targeting and looking for.
You had 2 total combat tours. Let's go to your second one. So let's walk through that one.
Yeah. So my second one, we were 2009 timeframe. I was a company executive officer, and we were just south of Fallujah. And so we had these areas that really working to, by this point, the heavy fighting inside Fallujah had occurred. A lot of those insurgents had pushed out to those outskirts where they were trying to either move weapons and money or other things back into the city to continue the fighting. And so our role was, kind of just south of the Euphrates River, looking at some of those smaller villages very similarly, embed with them, get the intelligence we need, train the Iraqi police, train the Iraqi army to ultimately be able to do that themselves. And so that deployment, I spent most of my time inside the company operations center, just supporting those patrols that we had out there all the time.
Military is fascinating in that it often gives anyone, some of the pinnacle experiences of their lives, emotionally, physically, experientially. But at the same time, that comes with the inverse. It comes with some of the biggest kicks in the ass imaginable. Can you zoom out and tell me what was, in your opinion, the best and the worst aspect of your deployments, of the military, however you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I think in the best, and I hope this isn't cliche, but it's the military gives people experience, to your point, at an insanely young age and, very early point in their career, right? I was 23, 40 Marines, more or less on my own. You have squad leaders, 18, 19, 20 years old, 12, 13 people, kind of reporting to them. That I didn't appreciate this until I got out and started working with different organizations. We realized that experience is not common. And I think it's, truly one of the best parts of the military, because you can teach people how to make decisions. You can teach people how to operate in uncertainty. You can teach people, really, that comfort as a team leader with a mission and a group of people that you're responsible for, and that you're taught really early on that you are responsible for them. Whatever, they do or fail to do, it's on you. And that, I attribute that to a lot of, that I maybe saw after I got out of the military, of just being it's a really unique, uncommon experience for a lot of people today. But I guess the other side of that, you asked about the worst, to me, it goes back to that lack of strategy, that I saw. And this, again, where we were, there was a lot of changes occurring in Iraq. There was a lot of things that were happening. But the translation of that strategy from that general, that theater commander, down to the individual, Marine. And, at 23, right, we have this mission, very broad mission. You're training the Iraqi police, developing the Iraqi army. You're trying to get intelligence. You're doing this in an environment that you've never been in before. There was the second day that I was there, you realize really quickly how much I didn't know 3 days before, this. And so you're processing just this insane amount of information, trying to make understandings, working with Marines and your partners and to make decisions. And it was just incredibly frustrating not be able to tie that back to, is this advancing the mission? Is this getting us closer? And, all those parts about the military, that's just combat. That's just life in the military. I'm not complaining about that, but it's a matter of, how are you communicating decisions and building these structures and these strategies to actually empower, that 18, 19-year-old on the ground to make decisions that, gets us back out. And with hindsight being what it is, right? You look at Iraq, you look at Afghanistan. I don't know if we ever really figured out the right way to develop that strategy and then communicate it where everyone is working towards that same goal.
Yeah, it's almost difficult to comprehend, because at the highest level, the entire mission of Iraq and Afghanistan changed at a certain point away from the original intention. So on the ground, your platoon leader, your non-commissioned officer, they had crystal clear strategy. Hey, this is why we're going out on this patrol. But at the highest level, we had no idea why we were still in the countries oftentimes. It was tricky. So I guess another big macro question is what is one thing the military does well that you do want to see in the private sector, or that you're actually executing in the private sector right now?
Yeah. what I think is incredible about the military, they send people away to education and training, and you get cut off from your operations, from your unit. And you get these chances, whether it's a week-long course or a 6-month, kind of immersion program into something, you have the chance just to focus on nothing other than learning. And that, it's unheard of in the private sector where, you get someone, if you get to go to a course, you get to go to a professional development opportunity, might only be a day or two, you're not really off work. If you sit in a class or presentation today, everyone's got their computer, they're answering emails, they're on Slack, they're on Teams because their day job is still there. And it just puts the ceiling on anything that you are going to get out of, that time learning. There's a cap just based on distractions alone. And those distractions aren't just tech, it's the responsibilities. If you're a leader, you're a manager, you have people working for you, they have questions, you got to support them. And showing up 3 days later, pretending like you didn't get that message, who knows what you might have caused. But just the way the military's figured out of that chain of command where, that person below you is ready to step up, fill your role if you're out of pocket. And the way that just transitions into, yes, Sam, we're going to send you to this course, this school for 6 months because you're going to learn something that you're going to need. And I don't want you focused on anything other than whatever it is they're teaching. I just think that, especially look at businesses or government or schools or other things, just that opportunity to learn isn't there. And so you get people who are just kind of forced to do it on their own with, I say, varying degrees of success, just, from the sense of how much time someone has to commit after hours to doing that same sort of self-driven training.
It's a super interesting point. It actually shaped the way I perceive time. So when I think back of my time in the teams with the radically different training programs, you could be skydiving one week, combat diving the next, cold winter warfare the next. It felt like every minute was an hour. And I remember those trips better than I remember last week because it's changing and you're constantly being humbled and you're constantly learning. It's like you're immediately focused and present and constantly growing. Whereas when that environment stops, you're able to get into a rut. You're able to get into a schedule. Maybe a little bit of sameness creeps in, and it now becomes like a war, at least for me personally in the civilian world, to forcefully mix it up and make sure my feet are never really truly steady. That way I stay humbled, I stay learning.
When you go through school, there are seasons, there are years. When end of spring and you're going to summer break, and then at the end of summer going back into school, your life is broken up into those seasons. There's something to look forward to, and there's something that comes next. So often in just business or jobs, it's just the same day. Monday, it doesn't matter if it's January or July, it's the same. And without that, kind of your point of that intentionality of mix it up over the summer or do something different in the winter, just to kind of build just that break and that chance to reset your perspective on things. If you don't do it intentionally, years might go by and you might have what did I do? I think I did the same thing for the last 2 years. I don't really know that either. Just as a kid, or maybe growing up, just the way the school works, that wasn't the case. There was something new to look forward to and a closure from last year too.
It's a project to reinvent that, but let's wrap up your time in the military because this is the core of what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the Combat Hunter program and what your tenure there was like.
Yes, the last couple of years that I was in, the way at least the Marine Corps works, you spend 3-4 years in a deployable unit, then you get to spend 2-3-ish years in a non-deployable unit. And for me, that came where I was assigned to the School of Infantry and truly out in Camp Pendleton, California. And by luck of the draw, I got assigned to the Combat Hunter program. A captain had gotten fired the day before, and I was the next captain to check in to the unit. That was my selection to move into the Combat Hunter program. And then when I got there, it was the start of my second week. Got to set in at the start of the course and kind of see what this was about. And I was absolutely furious. I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life because I realized that all the frustrations, all the things that had made life in Iraq really hard in terms of identifying IEDs, identifying the insurgents, there was this course that was teaching people how to think and how to address that. And recognizing that I had just done a couple of deployments, we're driving through these minefields, we're talking probably to insurgents who, I'm a good guy. I guess he's a good guy. And you realize that there's this program that is teaching people how to think and how to change that dynamic. And happy to kind of answer questions kind of on the Combat Hunter course. But it changed that moment, that first course. There's like this before and after moment in my life of recognizing kind of what is possible and what is available.
Well, I like that you took that we had this incredible small team working on exactly what would have benefited every single person in a combat zone across all the military services. And you took it and kind of universalized it. So let's start kind of at the core. Talk about the pillars of that school, because your book, awesome. Thank you. It was really phenomenal. You talk about, there's a couple pillars, but you focus specifically on combat profiling. Can you identify the other pillars and then dig in specifically to combat profiling?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Combat Hunter course was, there's 3 pillars to the course. And just one quick step back. This was, the Combat Hunter course was taught by a unit called the Mobile Training Company. And the mission of that mobile training company was designed to take problems from theater commanders, build a capability around it, and train those units that were about to go out the door. And so as opposed to the traditional structured professional development program that could take years to change and influence in the military, this was a unit that was designed to bridge that gap of, we have this problem, let's make sure the next units that are coming in theater have those skills. And so that's where the Combat Hunter course existed. It was created in 2007 at the direction of then General James Mattis. And it was kind of these 3 pillars that you mentioned. The first was referred to as enhanced observation. It was a 2 to 3 day, kind of program. It was developed by a big game hunter, and it was teaching Marines, how do you observe? And it slowed down the process, teach a process for observation, and learn how to do it with both the naked eye and using the different optics that a unit would have available to them or that they would carry with them. And it was just focused on the principles of observation. That's kind of where it started. After that, Marines went into something called combat tracking. And this was teaching Marines, how do you follow footprints? How do you follow someone that you cannot see? And what it was really doing was teaching Marines, how do you observe and read the physical terrain? If you can read the ground, and if you can follow footprints, or you can look at, some sort of markings on the ground and decipher, this is what I think happened here. You also it's a level, it's attention to detail. It's a thought process that is truly remarkable for the people who kind of make this leap and go, oh, I can do it now. But those people become really good at identifying IEDs, because they might notice the change of texture on the ground, or a slight change in color where something was just dug in, or a slight change in color in a concrete curb, a sidewalk where something was cut out and a bomb was put in. They become super aware of the physical terrain of the ground. So that was the second pillar of Combat Hunter. Then the third was combat profiling. This was a program designed by a former police officer that was teaching Marines, how do you read the human terrain? How do you translate these observations on nonverbal behavior that allow you to identify a person's intention? So the Combat Hunter course was these 3 pieces. Start off, here's how you observe just in general. Here's how then they're tracking how you're going to do this on the physical terrain, on the ground, and then how you're going to do it with people and the humans that are surrounding you when you go outside the wire.
Drill in on the Cooper's color codes. This was the first time I heard of it. It was one of the most simple, boiled down versions of situational awareness and profiling or preparedness I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's, in case you have any purists on listening, I'm going to give you just a little bit of context on this. So this was it's conditions of awareness. It was first created by Marine Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper, and then expanded on by Army Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And depending on whether you want to go to the initial or if you agree with Colonel Grossman's additions, you'll have disagreement. But essentially, it's 5 different conditions that identify your level of awareness at any moment in time. At the low end of the spectrum, you have condition white. This is a person who is completely situationally unaware, no idea what is happening around them. Generally speaking, when you talk about condition white, people are like, oh, I'm never in condition white. I'm a protector. I'm always aware of my surroundings. But you got to go to sleep. Eventually, you're going to go into, you're going to eat dinner somewhere. Your back's going to be towards the door. Condition white, while it's bad for situational awareness, is also just a fact of life sometimes. From condition white, you can elevate up to condition yellow. This is referred to as a relaxed alert. You know that there's bad people, bad things, bad stuff out there, and you are actively scanning your surroundings, trying to find them, but you haven't found it yet. That's why it's the relaxed alert. Once you do find something to pay attention to that attracts your attention, you elevate to condition orange. This is a specified alert. You are focused and you're starting to come up with your plan of, I found this thing that stands out, it's attracted my attention. What am I going to do about it? You're building your plan. Condition red, you put that plan into action. You're engaging with it. And then again, this is where Colonel Grossman added on to it. You also have condition black. For some people, if you become overwhelmed by events, if it's too much for you, you go into condition black. It's the same as condition white, situationally unaware, unable to function, but just for a different reason, as opposed to complacency. It's a result of being overwhelmed. And so the reason that's part of the Combat Hunter program, or what was developed, it's not just a matter of when you're in condition yellow, hey, be aware of your surroundings, put your back against a wall. Like, it's not that generic situational awareness. To be able to go from yellow into orange, you have to know what you are looking for. You have to know how to scan your surroundings. It's not aimless. It has to be purposeful with really specific things that you are looking for. And that's what the Combat Hunter course taught was, once you get someone who mentally is in condition yellow, they know that they need to be, looking for those threats. Well, how are you doing this? What are those things that you're looking for? And both the physical terrain, but also the human terrain. That's really what the course was designed to do, is make that it's an informed level of awareness.
It was one of the best breakdowns I'd ever heard. And a lot of people rely on intuition to do that. And the problem with intuition, like you said, is you might assume you're in yellow, when in fact you're not. And that leaves you unprepared. It leaves you right of bang, potentially. And even just conceptually, knowing in your head, there's a full spectrum going from white to black. It just gives you words to this intuition so you can more quickly dial it in and say, oh man, I just slipped out, or I'm taking this way too far. My heart rate's pushing 170. I'm about to lose control because I'm losing control of my bodily functions. It's a brilliant system.
Well, and the other thing too, when it's limited to intuition, I remember before my first deployment, we're meeting with the unit that we're going to take over for, and this platoon sergeant looks at me and goes, hey, sir, you do 3 deployments, you're going to become really good at this. And in my head, in that moment, like, this is day 1 on the ground, like, 3 deployments? Well, like, right? Like, how much time is in between today and, like, if that's when I'm going to become effective at this? I thought it was not ridiculous. It was absurd that was how to get there. And what the Combat Hunter course taught was not only what to look for, it provided a language and the ability to articulate and explain this. And when you have that language, you can now teach it. It doesn't mean that someone who's learning something on day 1 is going to be at the same level that someone who's been doing it for 10 years, but you can short circuit that learning curve and then begin teaching people, hey, you just don't go talk to random Iraqis for 7 months. This is what you're doing when you're having that conversation, and this is what you're looking for. This is how you're going to cause changes in that baseline to figure out, is there something here to dig into? And that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest things that the Combat Hunter course taught was, how do you get past that, where you're not talking to you see it with public safety, police officers, corporate security professionals. People have been doing it for 20 years. Oh, I got this. Like, yeah, but great. I'm day 1. How do I operate not at your level, but be able to work alongside you and contribute, not just waiting 10 years till I become, hopefully, good at it.
One of the best sections of the book, and when I read it, I actually laughed out loud. It reflects one of the best lessons learned I had in all my time in the military. And it was that perfect decisions aren't possible. So growing up, typical American lifestyle, there seems to be an answer for everything. You go through school, there's standard metrics, there's the books you have to read, things just exist. Businesses exist, schools exist, processes exist. And when you get to the military, all of a sudden, you have to make decisions with perfectly imperfect information. And then you have to make that decision and own it, for good or bad. Can you talk about the power of perfect decisions aren't possible?
Yeah.
How that came up, and then how you actually get people to accept that slogan without having to learn the hard way.
When this course was created, there was a shift that I think is important to recognize, like in the military, and kind of what the Combat Hunter course goals were. As we invaded Iraq, 21 days from the time invasion started to occupying Baghdad, right? The military just moved faster, further, while taking fewer casualties than any military has ever done in history. We completely overwhelmed our adversaries. And they learned, if I wear a uniform, I'm dead. So they took off their uniform, put on civilian clothes, and changed the way they fought to undermine that technological advantage. When they did that, we Americans lost our ability to find and identify who those insurgents were. And so the way it worked is we'd essentially wait to get shot at, wait to get blown up so that we could react to that attack. As soon as someone shot at you, go, that's who I've been looking for. Let's go to work. The problem with that is you have to get shot at or blown up before that occurs. I didn't talk about the victim-operated IEDs too, right? Sometimes you can get the attack without ever even then seeing who is responsible for it. And we've become very reactive where you attack us, we put more armor on our vehicles. You build a bigger bomb, we put a little bit more armor on our vehicles. The goal of the program was to shift Marines left of bang, get us operating ahead of the event so that we didn't have to get shot at, so that we could regain the initiative. And I say all of that because when you are talking about operating earlier on the timeline, there's a certain amount of speculation that has to occur where you are projecting from what I see to what does that mean? What are those implications for me? Therefore, I need to take proactive intervening action to not get blown up. In the military, right, there's a certain amount where if you wait till you have perfect information, you're too late because that bomb just went off or that person just shot at you. So the course and the structure was based around, well, how do you teach someone how to make a decision that is more often right than wrong? How do you teach them how to make a good enough decision? And you're doing this, kind of to your point, Sam, like in an environment where you have limited time and limited information available to you. And that's just the starting point for making imperfect decisions. And the way that Marines were taught how to do that was kind of the strategy that we used, where it was baseline plus anomaly equals decision, where once you know what's normal, you can then identify that thing or that person or that indicator on the ground that is not normal. And once you identify that anomaly, the thing that stands out, now you can make a decision. And as long as our factors that were used to establish the baseline and used to identify the anomaly were grounded in science and grounded, and these are reasonable observation that can allow us to infer intentions, and from that inference on intentions, using the rules of engagement, understanding am I at an imminent threat or kind of where we are on that spectrum, choose an appropriate course of action based on that. But again, it's not perfect because waiting for perfect information meant a Marine or soldier or sailor had to die or get shot at before you could actually take act. Yeah.
Which goes back to the irony that this course isn't mandatory training for everybody who joins the military. And maybe it will be at some point. Let's put a pin in this. We're going to come back to it, but I want to hit your transition first out of the military.
Sure.
Most people who've been on this program have talked about it. Some had the easiest transitions in the world. Others suffered greatly for significant reasons we've talked about before. So kind of when did you know your time with the military was done? Why did you decide to get out?
Ultimately, the decision was made when I realized that I was not done with this program yet. My time in School of Infantry and the mobile training company was coming to an end. And I knew that there was something else that I needed to do with that. And that really came as a result of, one, when we would provide training, so we could only, based on instructor to student ratio limitations, and that was based on the course was taught. It was very immersive. It was very hands-on. We could train about 40 out of every deploying 1,000 Marines. So 40 out of 1,000 Marines meant this unit was pre-deployment qualified. And so after every unit that deployed, we usually, once, they would go through the course, those Marines, then they would have a few weeks of pre-deployment leave, do a 7-month deployment, come back, have a month of post-deployment leave, and then we would get the chance to debrief them. And in every single time, we'd hear from these Marines of something in that course saved my life. I'm having this conversation with you because of something I learned. And if that is the success rate, 40 out of 1,000 is not enough. So we'd have to tell these Marines, because sometimes those Marines would say, I want to come through the course again, but we'd have to say, no, we've got to get to new 40, people. But they were learning something for the first time. There was no follow-on material available to them. At the time, there was nothing at all that they could access. And so our response was, glad you're here. Glad it paid off for you. Sorry, good luck. And I hated that, right? Just looking at someone just in the eye and saying, you can't come through again. And so part of the reason I got out was I wanted to take these concepts and make sure that any Marine or any person that wanted to learn how to get left to bang had a resource or access to the resources to do it. And the other piece was that we were starting to train reserve Marine units. So sometimes we'd have like a unit from Southern California, and like day to day, like these Marines day to day, they're police officers, and they would come through the course and they'd go like, "Glad to have this before I go to Afghanistan, but I'm work 4 or 5 days a week in Southeast LA, and we don't get anything like this. It's just, hey, go learn your beat without any sort of guidance." They're saying we need this, and so recognizing that it wasn't just an international, it wasn't just a military concept, that this had direct application here at home for police, public safety, security, schools. And so that was kind of the moment I made the decision to get out. My co-author, Jason Riley, and I had just gotten a book deal with Stephen Pressfield and his company to write Left to Bang. And that became the goal. That became the next mission of I'm going to figure out how to get this out there to a larger number of people.
Okay. When it came down to the transition itself, do you have any valuable lessons, 1 or 2 or 3, for military who might be transitioning or in the process of transitioning and still digesting that shift from the military to their civilian job?
Veterans have all of the icing on a cake, but sometimes they don't have the cake itself, meaning they have learned how to lead. They've learned how to make decisions. They've learned how to endure incredible hardship and come out better and stronger on the other side. When that veteran is then applying for a job in this private sector, they are competing against someone who's operated and worked in that field sometimes their entire career. And so they have learned the ins and outs of marketing or sales or human resources, and they understand that technical field. Even if they have never led or can't make decisions or anything else, they can talk the talk, if nothing else, about that job that you're competing against. And so one of the things that, when I got out, I started my company, I struggled with, and I see it in a lot of job candidates, or veterans who are applying for different jobs, it's they have to first learn that field that they are in and that they want to work in. Because if they're going to stand out, like they have to spend a moment sometimes to take a step back and really learn whatever it is that they're going to do. And that doesn't always land well, or people are like, but I've done all these things, I've deployed, I've sacrificed, and you have, right? But you still have to learn the field. And once they do that, though, you also then see the group of veterans accelerate insanely fast, because you can learn marketing, you can learn teaching, you can learn whatever it is you're going to do. And then once you gain that knowledge, now your leadership, now your decision-making, now all those other things come to bear. You see people accelerate, but sometimes it requires a little bit of a step back to go, I need to learn finance, from the inside before I can run a finance team.
I love it.
And maybe that's true. Maybe there's people who can do without it, but I think that from my experience.
Love it. Let's get down to the core. So Left to Bang, you guys published it. It was a bestseller. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually read it, and it reminded me how much my own awareness had atrophied over the years of not being in the combat zone. And I read it. I remember going to the supermarket the day after, and my mind was just on fire. I was like, oh, look at this guy's tattoos. Oh, look at the way this person's walking. He's obviously physical. And I wonder if he's a threat, a good guy or a bad guy, because you note in the book, the people who are often the most physically dominant in their environment, they're either the good guys or they're bad guys. They're not usually between. And it just sparked my mind. It got me super hyper aware of everything around me. But that's just the curiosity of going to a supermarket. That's not even full application across the civilian world, whatever your profession is, whatever industry or vertical. Can you talk about like the work you're doing now? It's a very broad question, but how do you see it being applied right now across the civilian world?
Yeah, and there's kind of like 3 answers to this, like whether you're talking like the tactical, operational, kind of more strategic level of these organizations. But, tactically, there's a lot of any role, any part of life that involves looking at humans. Like there's something, that comes from the Combat Hunter course. Because what it did was, in the book, we talk about this as the 6 domains. When we teach it now, we refer to it as the 4 pillars, and just everything's, we just repackaged the assessments that people made based on feedback as they came through the course. But, it teaches you, how do you look at individuals? How do you look at groups of people? How do you look at how people are interacting with their environment? And how do you look at the collective mood? And, this could be, there's the obvious application for public safety and security professionals of identifying threats and recognizing people who warrant your attention. But, we work with, sales teams or HR specialists who are looking to improve their ability to read the behavior and understand the people that they're either trying to hire and screen or influence and sell. The concept has been applied in cybersecurity settings where they're looking at essentially defining those pre-event indicators. What is baseline network behavior and what are those indicators that will show us that someone is making an attempt on our system, and how do you automate that to make decisions? We've worked with nurses trying to get a better read on their patients, and through observation of nonverbal behavior, get a sense of are we tracking to where we need to be, or are there indicators that are showing that their conditions are worsening, even if they aren't articulating it or even if they aren't communicating it. Schools, teachers, and how do you read behavior in the classroom, not just to recognize threats, but just become a better instructor and see kind of who's connecting with your message. And so those behavioral pieces just provide a language and the ability to articulate and explain, this is what I'm seeing. And then, kind of to your point on going to the supermarket, it's so easy these days to get sucked into your phone or feel vibrate and look down and check what it is. But what's happening up here, right? I say that we're on camera, so maybe not here, but out there. And a way just to systematically, be curious about your surroundings. And there's a lot that you can gain from that. And I think about this. We were just earlier this week talking with a church security team, and they're like, well, some of these behaviors, could be someone who's got a gun, or could be someone who's an attack, or it could be someone who's having a hard time and they are coming to church to talk to someone. And the point was 100% correct. There's, when you recognize the anomaly, it does not mean, hey, let's shoot them. They're obviously a threat. It means I don't need to look at this other 99% of the people here. I'm going to focus on this one. And as a result of using this behavior, though, that same security officer can go have a conversation to figure out, in that assessment phase, is this a threat? Nope. This person just needs to speak with someone. And then you can actually accomplish, the mission, the purpose of that church, of that religious, center of, let's get them to someone to talk, right? It's just using the same behaviors to identify those people who might need a little support. Same concept applies when we're talking with schools and teachers of, just because you see this doesn't mean they have a gun. It might mean that they're not prepared for a test that day and they're displaying the same degree of discomfort, or they watch their parents have a fight or something. Let's just go see if this kid is okay. And so there's a lot of those behavioral pieces that go into just having a better understanding of the people that we interact with every day. And then from there, as you kind of look at just the applications, today we work with a lot of organizations, both public and private sector, who are recognizing that the world is changing and are applying the same concepts of identifying those pre-event indicators, those watch points, those action points to let them know, hey, my market, my customers, the technological, the tech environment, things are shifting. How are we defining that and using that awareness to make better, more informed plans for the way that we're going to position ourselves, for the way that we're going to enter new markets, or whatever it is that they are facing kind of in their job. So, the principles of left to bang, it's been just really interesting to kind of see both from the behavior side, but just those broader, how do you shift earlier on that timeline, how organizations are finding value and how they're then using it to shape what they do next.
It's truly universal. I want to drill in just to even double down on that universality of it. There's a couple points I pulled out from the book just because I thought they were particularly relevant right now. One of them is the proactive, reactive mindset. So we've been saying left of bang, but let's drill in a little bit more on the proactive versus the reactive. Let's say, take it however you want. If you could root it in a concrete example, great. If not, just riff on it conceptually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the premise of getting left to bang, if you take bang, it's simply in the context of violence. Let's say it is the minute the attack begins. When you are left of bang, or you take bang, you put on a timeline, it's time zero. It's right in the middle of that line. When you're right of bang, it means the first time that you knew about that potential threat was when the shooting started. When you're left of bang, it means you're operating before those rounds are getting fired. And the premise of left to bang and the Marine Corps program is that you're looking for people, the behaviors that reveal they have a violent intent. And that violent intent begins the minute a person makes a decision to commit an attack. As soon as someone decides, I'm going to commit an attack, to the minute they start shooting, that defines your opportunity window to prevent or intervene or preposition or somehow influence that attack. And so when we talk about getting proactive, it's going through this really set of 4 steps of recognizing potential threats. Once those potential threats are recognizing, assessing that threat of determining, is this a concern or not? Once that threat is assessed, then making a decision, well, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to intervene? And then the 4th step is putting that decision into action and actually stopping and interrupting that attack cycle and not letting bang occur. And so we talk about this proactive versus reactive. It's structuring kind of the way that you go through these 4 steps. And it's interesting the way we met, Sam, if nothing else, but the ability for technology to drastically expand, the size of an area that we can scan and assess and start to say, this is where we need to look. And with that recognition, the ability to accelerate this whole process of putting people into a spot to intervene. But it's, to be proactive, you got to go through those 4 steps.
I see it as being similar to our conversation earlier about recreating the military education process, to constantly stay learning, constantly be a little disrupted in that. In a combat environment, of course, it makes sense to be proactive. You're forcefully reminded with the crack of a gun. But here, where it seems like things are relatively safe, and they are for the most part, it takes a deliberate, conscious effort to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Do you see, when you start working with people, whether it's a church or a school or a business, do they latch onto that and then start to take that seriously and really engage their minds and say, wow, like I didn't even realize this world existed of being this far left to bang?
Yeah, and there's 2 pieces, I think, to your question. The first is it becomes harder in America because we live in a relatively safe society where the overwhelming majority of your experience, you are not at risk. And that is very different when you're overseas where there's threats every day and you know that they're there. You're just trying to figure it out. And so it requires a little bit more dedicated, deliberate attention to stay this aware today, because generally speaking, you're not going to get shot or punched in the face every time you look at your phone. Like, you're not personally at risk. The way that people would act, though, would be very different if that was the threat. Your phone is down and you're just always aware of your surroundings. And so one, there's the absolute bias, that comes in, frequency of bias, and a number of other things that require this deliberate attention because you're not currently here. The number of organizations, most of the organizations that we work with are right at bang, right? They have had something occur and they said, we can't let that happen again. And then they're like, well, how do we prevent it? How do we actually shift left to bang? But so much of preparation for risks and threats requires that people perceive the risk. And they perceive not only the risk, but the way it's going to impact them. And if there is no perception that this thing can do significant harm to myself or my family or my school or my company or whatever it is, there's no reason to invest in it. And sometimes we'll work with organizations that are lucky where they have seen a peer organization deal with something like, oh, that was not great. We should definitely not let that happen to us. Or they have dealt with an incident that was not catastrophic, but they're like, ooh, that could have been way worse. We better figure out how we're going to not let that happen again. And so it's just kind of interesting, it's the organizations who we find are most willing and interested to get left to bang are the ones who've already realized that they weren't, I mean, they didn't have that skill. And if that happens again, they might not, whether in the sense of personal safety or organizational survival, will not be around if they don't figure out how to address that in the future.
Yep. Truly, truly strategic. Another piece that I found super helpful, there's a lot of tidbits in this podcast I think people can walk away from, but one of them is the combat rule of 3. And like a lot of things in the military, it's broken down brutally simple. So it permeates your brain. You could remember the combat rule of 3. Can you riff on that one? Because people can walk away from this with that in their minds.
I was just waiting for it. You guys, former sailor, Sam, you and Air Force veterans love to point out that, of course, it's 3. The Marines, they couldn't handle 4. If they could, we would maybe look for more indicators or something. But the point is that we don't want to hit a point of paralysis by analysis where, because we are not looking to make perfect decisions, we're looking to start this decision-making process, make a decision, and then move on with it. You've got to be able to move fast. And not only just move fast, but keep up that pace. of that, the decision-making process. And so the rule of threes is there to intentionally tell Marines that, could you get 7 indicators that this person is a threat? Yeah. But at the point when you hit 3, stop your assessment process, stop your observations, move into that decision-making, build your plan, and move on with it. Because otherwise, when we talk about that window, again, for attacks, attack decision made, attack begins, you don't really know what that is. You don't know once you recognize that behavior. Do I have 1 second? Do I have a minute? Do I have an hour? Do we have somewhere like, and so if you are, spending too long to try to get just a little bit more certainty or a little bit more confidence, you might miss that chance to actually intervene or prevent the attack from occurring. So that rule of threes, it's just that hard stop of, sometimes forcefully, we can't keep going. You can be confident because the behaviors that are written about the book, because those are backed by science, right? So every behavior that in there, the course have been went through a number of rounds of analysis from people with PhDs and super smart and social sciences say, yeah, these are valid the way that we are assessing them, observing them, putting them together. So you can trust that the behaviors that we're using are objective indicators of a person's intent. You don't want to make that decision off of just one indicator, but don't go beyond 3. You can trust it. You can be confident. Move forward with your actions at this point.
Love it. Before we get to the lightning round, anything else you want to bring up? Left of Bang related, CP Journal related, name it.
When the Combat Hunter course was being created, there weren't many resources that are available. And when Jason and I sat down to write the book, part of the goal was to show people using the Marine Corps as a case study that prevention is possible. And you stop and you look at what companies like yours are doing right now. In some ways, the book set off like this chain of events where broke the 4-minute mile, where it's yeah, it's possible. You can prevent attacks from occurring, and here's ways how. And then from there, now we're having technology. There's a number of different approaches and methods to get left to bang. There's a lot of different technology and advice and guidance that simply wasn't here in 2007. And so it's a really interesting time. So for people who are looking to figure out, well, how do I apply this in my environment, to my business, my organization, my family, whatever it is that you're thinking about, the amount of things that are available to assess and figure out, is this the one that is right for me? It's never been greater right now. So it's a really interesting and exciting time to be focused on this because it's accelerating. And, you think for me, the mission was, father, little kids, every time you see a school shooting, it's heartbreaking. The answer is 0. Right? What we should be pursuing as a society is 0 shootings, right? No kid should have to worry about that. And so the more that this industry and these approaches grow, we can pursue that goal like never before. And it's just like I said, just a very exciting time to be able to work, kind of in this field.
It's incredible, the use to which we could put the technology and then the mindset behind it, which you're talking about. Let's go to the lightning round. So
sure.
More of a personal kind of quick thing. What are a couple things you do to prime yourself for the workday? You've been super productive, extremely successful author. You're a Marine Corps. What do you do to get ready?
I get up every day. I wake up around 4 most days, and I sit down and write for almost 2 hours. Wow. I don't check email. I get up. I make a pot of coffee. I don't look at the news. I don't look at anything. I've got a blank screen that I set up the night before. So I come in, I open the computer, and I write for 2 hours. And that really sets my day. And I say that, you talk about priming your day, right? I get these things that I've been processing overnight or things. I get the chance to focus on this. And then I'll come in and answer client emails and do the projects and everything else that we have going on. But when I don't write in the morning, the rest of my day it's just disrupted. It's disjointed because I didn't get the chance, to get it out. That is how I start almost every day. And I said 4:00. I just want to also note, little kids, people say that's super early. Yeah, but I probably went to bed at 8:00 the night before. So I'm up at 4:00 and I still got a solid 7-8 hours of sleep. But that window from 4 to 6, there's no emails, there's no client phone calls, there's no text messages. It's because of the time of day. There's no distractions to doing what is needed.
That sounds like a cure to the attention economy. It's almost like a religious purity. Do you know what you're going to write about ahead of time, or do you sit down at that screen and just start riffing?
sometimes I'm working through, different articles, or I might have started something, not finished it the day before. And so I maybe did, a lot of research or digging into something, or started to outline, article or paper or something that I'm working on. And then the next day it's okay, I'm focused on this one thing. And other times I'll think I'll know I'm going to write and just get up and I don't want to write that. Like something else is just exciting me. And I try not to become like overly disciplined or like, no, I've got to finish this thing. I'm going to go with where the energy is that day.
Oh, this is powerful. I got to try it out. Yeah. What about the body, which always impacts the mind? What do you do for physical training now?
I realized getting out of the military how much routine matters to me for working out. And when we had our third kid, I used to go at like 5 a.m. Like I'll get my workout in the morning. 3 kids at home, that's not possible anymore. So I'm really excited because I finally got because I'm working in the morning, I can drop the kids off at school, and then like 7:30, 8 o'clock, I can go get workout. And so I'm excited. I think I've got a routine that I can sustain for the foreseeable future, but been out of it for a little bit. But I focus on CrossFit style workouts and running. Those two things are kind of how I look at the body side of it. But
awesome. Books are some of the best things in the world. They're one of the biggest the attention economy as well. What are some that have changed your life?
I've heard of a book called Mastery by Robert Greene?
I have.
This book changed the way I think about development and learning, the way it broke down the apprenticeship phase and kind of the 3 steps in that apprenticeship phase. This is like really structured the way I think about like learning how to learn from this apprenticeship phase to this journeyman phase. Then ultimately, for those people who are putting in the work enough to hit that point of mastery, but that shifted things. And I've given that's probably also my most gifted book. And I've learned that it's hit or miss. Some people love it. They're like, I'm all in. I found other people like, I can't do it. Like, this isn't for me. And so, but for me, mastery is absolutely number one. The second one is Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. That alongside Mastery, I reread at least every year, if not more. I have Steven Pressfield, he published Left of Bang, his publishing company did. And so I have a copy from him. I remember I was in his garage. We had just finished, we were in the process of the first draft, and it had just come out, and he had signed a copy that said something along the lines of "You're next." And then he gave me the book. And so it's always been on the bookshelf. And I think he was also saying, like, as the publisher side of like, hey, you got to turn pro. Like, you got to figure out, like, you have the idea, you have these concepts, like, it's time to turn them into the written word. So I think it was both like motivation and also a bit of management in there too. And then another one, book called Rework by a guy, Jason Fried. Written a number of books, but he runs a company, 37 Signals, out of Chicago, and he writes a lot about business. But one of the things that really resonates me, like him and his co-author, they write in this really clear, concise, really short chapter styles. And I've always read his books and got things out of him from like a business perspective. I always just kind of admired like the structure and the way he can use the structure to talk about it in a nonfiction sense of just communicating of, sometimes tough ideas, but it's really simple, really straightforward, and really articulate. And so I probably reread that one a lot too, just as I think about not only just so much about the words in the book, but structure styles. I think about being a writer and how I want to package ideas and everything else. But that would be the third, I guess.
Awesome. Last question. How can people follow you and get your work?
One is through our website. That's the CP Journal. It's cp-journal.com. That we are writing every week on different preparedness topics. There's a portion of the site dedicated where if you want to go through a video-based course on the behaviors written about in Left of Bang, that's on there. We're constantly developing new Left of Bang related content that is there. And that is pretty much the only place that I am writing today. So I've gone off most other social media, but cp-journal.com.
Rock and roll. Patrick, genuinely appreciate having you on. Thank you for your time and wish you all the best.
No, thanks for having me, Sam. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.